arts, lifestyle. SNS Online.
In the beginning, there was the Mayker, and he made all around us. He made all the men and all the women. He made all the creatures on this, his earth. The Mayker loved each and every one of us. But then all us men and women betrayed him. They took his trust and spat on it. And the Mayker was angry. He sent us down into dark earth to atone for the sins of our forefathers and mothers. And one day, 'tis said, the Mayker will give us a sign, and we will all be forgiven, and we will all rise up to the land. And the light that the Mayker holds there in his palm will be given to all of us, and all shall prosper in this life and the next.
Hello, welcome to SNS Online. Today's show focuses on an astonishing and powerful debut novel that has garnered much attention and praise for its author on both sides of a pond. Set centuries past in the deep, dank coal mines of Victorian England, Bearmouth offers the strongest of friendships forged in the most desperate of environments. It also acts as a dystopian warning to what is happening in the 21st century. Published by Pushkin Children's Books, Bearmouth has already been listed as the Times Children's Book of the Year, the 50 Best Books of 2019, and the FT's Best Young Adult Books of this year. Oh, and rumour has it, from a very reliable source, that a film version is on its way. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Bearmouth's creator, novelist Liz Hyder. So, Liz Hyder, it only takes one person to start a revolution, and I think that person has to be you, Liz, with this powerhouse novel, Bearmouth, which I absolutely loved. Just cracking stuff.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
A world of hard labour, child labour in the minds of England centuries past, dealing with, for people who haven't obviously read the book yet, dealing with low life expectancy via rockfalls, explosions, meagre diets, murders, and as well as all the rest of it. You've got murders as well, religion being used as a force of control, but as well as being shocking and upsetting at times, it's also incredibly uplifting. And I would say not the easiest subject to tackle for a seasoned novelist, but this is your debut novel. Oh my God.
So a confession time, and I think this is a really good thing for other aspiring writers out there.
Go on.
It's my first book to be published, but it's my 7th book.
Ah, right.
So, like in the same way that people go and do MAs in creative writing or whatever, I just sat and wrote a load of stuff until I got better. So I'm glad it's my first. I'm glad it's my first one to be published. I think it's the right one to be the first one.
No, it's important to underline that. I get what you're saying, of course, but at the same time, even so, Liz, I mean, this is quite a debut. I mean, you are the talk of the town, the Guardian, and all the rest of it. There's loads of blogs giving the most incredible reviews of Bearmouth.
Yeah, the reception's been extraordinary. I mean, I didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, obviously you never do, but you hope that people like it. But I think I've always thought of it very much as kind of more of a Marmite book, because it's written in dialect, it's written first person, you know, it's written about kind of, you know, it's potentially quite dark book. You know, as a writer and having written a lot over a long period of time, you do develop a thick skin to stuff anyway. Yeah. But actually the reception's been extraordinary. And I'm sort of waiting for people to kind of hate it, I guess. And actually people have really, really strongly loved it. They've had very, very strong reactions to it. And I sort of wasn't expecting that in a way. I think I'm kind of a cynic. I'm kind of optimistic for a lot of things, but I'm also quite a cynic. So I guess it was, it was a sort of without getting all psychoanalytical about it, I think it was just a protection thing. But it's been amazing. People have really taken it to heart and have taken kind of Newt's story to heart. And it's I mean, I keep pinching myself. Like every day something else will happen, or someone else will review it, or send me a really nice message, or, you know, I had a kind of Q&A sent through to me from a kid at a local school who'd read it. I was doing a school project on it, and, you know, it's just lovely having this 12-year-old email you and say, I read your book, it's amazing.
That's fantastic.
That's fantastic.
So what led you to write such an extraordinary story? I mean, essentially one buried in time, quite literally.
I got angry.
You got angry?
I got angry. So I went. I live in Ludlow in South Shropshire. I'm from London originally, as I'm sure listeners will be able to tell from my accent. But I'm not far from Wales, and I really like going to the Welsh coast. I think the Welsh coast is fantastic, one of the kind of best coasts in the world. You know, great walking, whatever. Went over there kind of for a walking holiday, really, and it rained. Dear old Wales, it rained.
What a surprise.
So I couldn't go for a walk, so I went down a slate mine because I was like, it's indoors, we can do that instead.
As you do.
As you do. And it was just extraordinary. And I went down mines as a kid, you know, I got taken down the odd mine as a kid. But I didn't really sort of remember it. And I knew that children worked in mines, you know, back in the day. But I'd kind of forgotten all of that stuff. And then going down this mine and seeing that, you know, boys from the age of 12, they did have their right nostril slit on their first day when they worked in that mine. And it was to prove that they were kind of man enough to work there. But also it shows that you're the property of the mine, really, as well, at the same time.
It's like branding.
Yeah, it is. It is totally.
Form of branding, yeah.
It's totally branding, but it's also kind of almost in a way like voluntary branding by the group who work there. So there's sort of a cult element to that as well. And the other thing, there were a couple of things in that same mine. It's called the Clanfair Slate Caverns. It's just south of Harlech. There's a big stone figure in the rock. I mean, you couldn't make... this is what I was thinking. You couldn't make this up. There's a big stone figure in the rock that the workers used to doff their caps to as they came in and out each day, which obviously became then, you know, a key part of Bearmouth. And the other thing was that there was a stretcher there, like a kind of a stretcher from 80 years or so ago, and it's a coffin without the lid. And if you think about it, it makes sense. If you have an injury down in a mine and you want to get someone out to the top, you don't want their arms falling out and around everywhere. So it kind of makes sense to carry them in something that has got, you know, sides, I suppose.
Sure.
But it just made me think, this is awful. Like, it's extreme exploitation. So yeah, I got angry. And then I started thinking about, you know, 0 hours contracts, and I thought about how exploitation has sort of been rebranded now as opportunity. And yeah, that's kind of where it came from, really. And then the voice of Newt sort of just popped up in my head, and I always knew who Newt was, and I knew that Newt would speak in that dialect, so that Newt's learning to read and write in the book, and so the spellings change and improve as the book goes on. Yes. Which was a nightmare to proof, I can tell you. I had a lot of very good people working on that. But yeah, that's kind of, so it started from a wet day in Wales going down a slate mine.
I get the impression that, you know, the research is forensic. I mean, it just feels like one small rung from actually going back in time, witnessing it.
Oh, well, thank you. That's amazing. That's kind of what I wanted. But so I wanted it to feel utterly immersive, that you feel claustrophobic down there, because I will hold my hand up. I'm 42, like, on Friday, and I am scared of the dark. I don't like the dark, and I don't like being underground, and I don't like small spaces. I wouldn't say I'm claustrophobic, and I'm not. I've been down a lot of mines, so I'm fine, you know, but there's something very, very oppressive about that environment.
Absolutely. Happy birthday for Friday, by the way.
But it's like a challenge of how can I try and recreate that for someone else? How can I try and recreate the dampness, the extreme darkness? I mean, you can hold your hand right in front of you, like right in front of your nose. I'm doing it now, actually. You, like, literally, so you can feel that your hand is there, your nose can feel it, you can sense that it's there, and you cannot see it. You cannot see anything.
Yeah.
The darkness is utterly absolute. And a lot of the stuff that happens in Bearmouth, a lot of it is based on it is based on the research, that people did have to pay for their own candles, their own boots, their own equipment. So on paper, it looked like quite a good job in some ways. It was sort of sounded like the money wasn't that bad after all. But then you had to pay for everything. And a lot of in some of the mines where the houses, you would have a house that was rented to you by the mine owner. And if you got injured, you could get booted out of the house. You were kind of left with nothing. It's really horrific, and I don't think we talk about it enough.
Weren't there any nice mine owners, fluffy, nice ones who wanted to just to be, give a reasonable deal? Were they all? I'm going to bleep this word. There were some who were a lot better than others, definitely. And there were some who paid for children to be educated, some who paid for children to go to schools and stuff. I'm not a historian. I wouldn't kind of pretend to be. Sure.
And what I wanted to do with Bearmouth was try and get enough research, as much research as I could get to make that world that I've created feel real. So in Bearmouth, my twist is there was no mine in which workers lived underground. I've made that up. That didn't happen.
Okay.
But the pit ponies, there were mines where pit ponies were kept there for their whole life. They'd go down when they were old enough to kind of work and had strength, so not quite a foal like an older one, and be kept down there until the day they killed over.
Sure.
So it's not much of a stretch of the imagination to think, well, if a human life is not of much value to that owner, why wouldn't you keep them down there as well,
Jowl and listen, lad. You'll hear the coalface working. There's many a Mara missing, lad, because he wouldn't listen, lad.
How would you describe Bearmouth to people who haven't really have known nothing about it at all? Just in a short sort of soundbite, if you like.
It's really hard because it's kind of a genre-busting book. It's kind of dystopian, but it's not. It's sort of historical fiction, but it's not. It's kind of a page-turning thriller. But it kind of crosses lots of different things. I sort of say that it's a thriller. It's kind of a page-turning thriller set down a Victorian-esque working coal mine. But that doesn't really kind of cover half of it, really. It's a very difficult book to have that kind of pitch line.
Sure.
It's that thing of if I was in a lift with Steven Spielberg, how would I pitch in the film?
Talking about the language of newts, I found it fascinating, and obviously it gets easier to read as it goes on. This is pitched for young adults and above, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I just wondered, was there any issues at all? Did you think about the fact that dyslexic people might be reading this, and would that be a help or a hindrance to them? I don't know if it's a question you've been asked before.
It's not actually. It's an interesting one. So I have been asked who did I write it for? To which the answer is I don't know. I don't think about who I write things for. I just write stories and hope that they find a home somewhere. I think if you start writing if you're in terms of books, if you start writing for an audience, I think then you're in danger of becoming a marketeer.
Sure.
Or you're writing something for the market. And I get why people do that. We all need to make a living, and it's not a criticism. But I think, I had kind of a clear idea in my head of what I wanted to do, and of Newt and Newt's voice being sort of the key to it. And that's sort of what I did. Yeah. And I think the reason it's been published as young adult is because Newt is young. Newt and Devlin are sort of two young characters in it who are both sort of early teens, and they're two of the kind of key protagonists. And I think that's why it's published as young adult. I read a lot of young adult stuff because I think some of the best writers writing today are writing young adult stuff. And writing for children. I really do. I think they're some of the best storytellers.
Well, you're traversing two different areas, really, and I think to write for children and to do it with empathy for them and not doing it in any patronising way is a real gift.
Yeah, and I think also, teenagers ask questions, right? Teenagers are the kind of... Teenagers and 2-year-olds are the best for just asking questions. And teenagers ask, obviously, more informed questions than a 2-year-old does, but just that asking kind of well, why? I'm not going to do that. Why? And teenagers are kind of brilliant at pushing boundaries and asking those questions how late can I stay out? Why can't I stay out later? To things like, why aren't we doing more about climate change? I hadn't heard of Greta Thunberg before I started writing this. but it's one of those sort of happenstance things where it's come out, and obviously she's extraordinary.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
extraordinarily powerful young woman. And I think also at that age, when you're sort of, on the cusp of puberty and after puberty, there's a real power. I think those kind of young adults, which is what they are, really sort of start to realise that they have agency and that they can use it. And I think that's a really empowering thing. And that's something that did feed into kind of that sense of realising that you can do something, you can change things, or you can, at least try and change things.
I mean, it's very relevant to now. Slavery still exists today. You could say it's a form of slavery. It's still very relevant to some of today's world.
Yeah, I mean, I read a horrible statistic the other day that there's something like over 1 million children still working in mines. It's something nuts. Like, it's horrific. Like, there are children working in mines now. So there's children working in open mines for coltan in the Congo. I'm not going to call it the Democratic Republic, because I think if you need to put that before your country, you're probably not democratic. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of children working in the mines there, and they're open cast mines, but they're still dangerous, and they're still dirty, and they're still filthy, and those kids have no protection. And a lot of them are also, past child soldiers and stuff as well. I mean, these kids have been abused, really. And it's the same in South America. There's children working down the mines there as well. And it's not gone away. It's just because it's not in our country anymore, we think it's hidden, which it is.
Yeah.
But coltan is in your mobile phone. It's in my computer. It's in your laptop. It's in your tablet. We're communicating now through machines that use coltan, and that coltan will have almost certainly come from Congo.
I mean, it didn't occur to me to think how awful these conditions would be, but you've brought that alive in the book, and it's very much a topic for, I would have thought, discussion in schools. This is a great book to be used as a teaching tool in schools. Would you think?
Yeah, definitely, because it's definitely inspired by what really happened. I mean, it's horrendous. So I can startle you with some horrific stuff, really. I mean, obviously there's the stuff in the book, but before 1842, anyone could work down a mine, pretty much. So there are records of a fair number of 4-year-olds working down the mines. And there's also records in Shropshire, where I now live, records of 3-year-olds and 2-year-olds working down mines.
Dear.
And so they would have been down there with one of their parents, but they would almost certainly have been helping pick up bits of coal and put them in a basket or something. So they would have been down there helping, and they would probably have been down there helping in the dark, and they would have been doing the same hours. So that's 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. And the first-hand accounts from the kids are just extraordinary. So there was a 2-year investigation, basically, that Queen Victoria requested quite early on in her reign. And so the inspectors went around a lot of the mines, all up and down the country, throughout England, throughout Wales. And they went down mines and they spoke to these children. So we have these extraordinary first-hand accounts from children who were actually working down the mines. And it just breaks your heart to read them. These are children who might have been maimed, who might now be disabled, who are working down there, but also children who are just so tired. Like in the book, one of the youngest character, Tove, falls asleep into his food because he's so tired, and that is based on a real account from a child who, on their one day off on Sunday, was so tired they couldn't even play a game, couldn't even go and play football.
It's almost like you're lighting a candle for the memory of those people, and quite rightly so. I mean, they're lost voices that you're bringing back to the fore.
I hope so. I mean, and I hope that. I mean, I think we really glamorise the Victorian era, and I think there's people like Jacob Rees-Mogg who definitely glamorise the Victorian era. And I think we do tend to think of it as like top hats and engineering projects and kind of great innovations and great ideas, things like, evolution and, and it is all those things. It was all those things, but it was built on exploitation and it was built on slavery.
Absolutely.
And I think we've got better at talking about slavery. I think there's a long, long way to go on that, but we've got better at talking about that and about kind of the real dark side of I want to say the dark side of the empire. It says I want to talk about Star Wars, but it's far worse than that. But we need to talk about that dark side more, and I think we also need to talk about the dark side here. And I think it is that thing of, because mines are underground and because mines were so often in, rural areas. They weren't visible. They weren't visible to the country in the same way that kind of, the cotton mills were.
Of course, yeah.
And the cotton mills obviously is another story in terms of exploitation, but working conditions in the cotton mills were improved before working conditions in the coal mines were. And I think that is because that they were visible. They were buildings that were, there right in front of you in the city, whereas the coal mines weren't. They were underground, they were hidden.
Yeah. And talking about sort of pushing boundaries with your book, there's sort of sexual violence or scenes that seem to be leading up to that. I mean, was that the real consideration, how much you could put in because of the age group you were aiming at?
Not massively. I mean, young adult books deal with pretty much anything and everything.
Okay.
Because young adults are young adults, really.
Sure.
And I think they're much more, certainly the young adults that I come across, whether I'm doing creative writing with them or, just like friends' kids or, kids that I meet and talk to, they're really well informed and they do ask those questions and they are smart and they are engaged. And I think you patronise teenagers at your peril,
Absolutely.
So I think it's better to deal with those things. And there certainly was some levels of, I guess, sexual opportunism and abuse that went on. I mean, there are records of women giving birth down the mines, and there are records of women being raped down there, which is what we'd call it now, because that's what it was. But they're few and far between because a lot of those people didn't have a voice. They didn't read and write. So there's no way for them to record their stories. And that's one of the things that makes that kind of the report the Queen Victoria commissioned so impressive. Is that really? It is those voices, and that they get a chance, even though it's only a couple of paragraphs or a short piece from each one. There is at least those voices are at least talking directly to you.
Yes.
Sort of through history, really. And I think, and there are bits that are, from the book that are taken directly from that. There are, like I say, Toe falling into his meal, and other bits of wording. And I have named Boy McAllister was a real boy. Oh. Newt Coombs is named after B.L. Coombs, who wrote a biography. He wrote his autobiography about working down the mines. Later on, he wasn't Victorian era. And Devlin is is named after Ray Devlin, who wrote a book about the children of the pits up in the Lake District, around the kind of Whitehaven district.
Okay.
I think you're right. I like that idea of lighting a candle to those people, all those people, really.
No, it's
because I think
wonderful.
when people think of mines now, they think of kind of the miners' strike and they think of the 70s. And they don't think of that kind of hundreds of years ago. It's not really that long ago. It's not that many generations between now and then.
I suppose it's because it's nothing we can affect any change with now because it's in the past. But of course, this echoes what is happening in the world. And that's why I think it's so relevant as well as being such a pacey thriller.
My father always used to say, pit work's more than hewing. You got to coax the coal along and not be riving and chewing. The deputy crawls from flat to flat, the putter rams the chunnins, and the man at the face must nae his place like a mother naes her young'un.
How long did it actually take you to write Bearmouth, Liz?
I'm going to make a lot of other people quite cross when I say this. So research-wise, it took me a while. But to actually write it, it took me pretty much a month.
Oh.
So I wrote it quick. I think about something forever until I can see it. So it's almost like a film in my head. And then I just try and clear. So I didn't write it like within a month entirely, but I wrote it I had 1 2-week session on it. And then I had a bit of a gap and I had another week on it.
Were you just living on pot noodle and coffee?
Coffee? Yeah, I don't. Pot noodles is a step too far. But yeah, that's how I write best. I basically binge write, and I did that with the second book as well. I wrote that really quickly.
Amazing.
But it's that's big. That's a bigger book. But yeah, every writer's got a really different, weird way of working. And I know writers that will sit with a blank, literally blank page and a pen, and I think they're mad. They'll just be like, "What will I start writing today?" And then they'll spend forever editing it. Whereas I'd rather edit it in my head, so that my first draft is tighter.
Yes.
And then edit it. So I plot before I write. I don't obsessively plot. I leave enough room that things happen and characters go and do weird things, which sounds mad because they're all in my head anyway. So.
So yeah, I mean, it questions everything, and I love that, and it's been so popular as well. From what I've read, selling like hotcakes. Amazing write-ups in the Guardian, selling like hotcakes, and yeah, I mean, Waterstone's debut fiction showcase I got here, Guardian, online blogs, all the rest of it.
Yeah, the Times a crazily brilliant review. Every time I look at it, I feel like I've made it up. I feel like the whole thing is basically couldn't have gone better. And that feels nuts to say because, having worked as a publicist as well and worked as a publicist in the arts and in publishing, it's very rare that this happens. Oh. It's very rare. Well, so I really do appreciate it. Although I keep pinching myself and going, it's like a cheese dream that I've yet to wake up from.
Well, you did it, Liz. You did it.
I know, but it's quite surreal, actually.
No, I understand. I'm hoping for a sequel because, not giving any spoilers at all, that there was loads of story that we have yet to know about. But I heard on the grapevine you didn't want to do that.
No.
Oh
no.
Spoil sport.
No, because it's a fable. I mean, it is a fable, really. And I think fables need to have an end. And, part of me is tempted, Thomas, who is teaching you to read and write, part of me would quite like to do a prequel on Thomas, but I'm just not going to do it because there are other stories I want to tell. Sure. And also I kind of feel that that's the realm of sort of almost like fan fiction. I think, that's kind of my dream is that there will be a certain amount of people who like it so much that they'll write their own stories around it, I guess, and it will have like further life through that.
Okay, so not a sequel then, but let's talk about your next book. What can you tell us? Are you working on one now?
Yeah, I've kind of nearly. I mean, I think it's almost ready to go out to the world. I've written it. There's probably about 10 people who've read it. Yeah, it's very different. It's not written first person in dialect. It's an adult book. It's set in 1840, in October 1840, so in the autumn. And the first thing that happens in it is a woman in the Shropshire woods is sort of struggling through the woods. Clearly something is very, very wrong. And she sprouts wings, she grows wings. And it's quite visceral and bloody. And then she gets shot. She gets shot by a crossbow. That's my opener. It's quite a wild ride. And it's kind of an adventure thriller. It's a kind of, I wanted to do like a kind of rollicking read. So there's sort of, to have that same page turning element that you've got in Bearmouth, but to do it in a story that's not a fable, that is kind of its own thing. It's about women's place in society, the evolution of ideas, I suppose, as well. And also, it's also, again, the importance of kind of questioning things, but it's also about the importance of kind of connecting ourselves with the environment, I suppose, like rewilding of ourselves as well.
Well, you've hooked me anyway. I want to know what happens next. There is talk, I hear, on the grapevine, of a film of Bearmouth. Now, are you going to spill the beans about this? Is there any beans to spill, Liz?
Yeah, there sort of are, actually. I mean...
Sacre bleu!
It feels like a weird... It's the weird cheese dream thing again. But, I've sold the film rights. And, obviously, being a cynic, as I mentioned earlier, being a cynic, I kind of thought, well, I sold the film rights, but it might never happen. Because it's a challenging book to film, not just because it's set down a mine, but because of what happens in it and various twists and turns. But then Endeavour, who are an amazing, big American company, they're part of William Morris Group, have kind of partnered with us. And the script is being written by Susan E. Connolly, who is a young Irish writer who is magnificent. And she's really exciting and really, really interesting person. She's just got a PhD in Cambridge on statistics and social impact. And she's an extraordinarily clever person and brilliant writer. And she's really passionate about the book. And I met her ages ago and we were a bit like, oh, hopefully this will happen. And yeah. It'd be brilliant. I'd love to see it as a film because I think it is a challenging book to make into a film. But
it's going to be very different, isn't it? I mean, you won't have the inner monologue unless you would have the odd narration over it. But it obviously does need quite a bit of adapting. But yeah, I mean, fantastic.
Because it would be different, and that's the thing that really excites me about it is that the challenge of how do you kind of recreate that essence of the book, but then it's something else. And it's quite funny because quite a few people are like, are you going to write the screenplay? It's like, no, that's not my area of expertise.
Liz, I'm so excited about the film and about how amazingly successful the book has come. Not surprisingly, I mean, it was such a page turner, and it's just such a privilege to get to finally talk to you about Bearmouth. So thank you so much, and best of luck with all of it. I don't think you need much. I think you've got some magic pixie dust and lots of talent.
Thank you very much. Well, it's very nice to talk to you finally as well.
Oh, fantastic.
We kept sort of missing each other, but it's been lovely. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad you liked it, because it's quite an exposing thing. You create something, you write something, you pour a lot into it, and then it goes out into the world and you kind of think, oh,
it's your baby. I
hope people like it. And you don't know what's going to happen. So yeah, that means a lot.
Liz Hyder, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Joe, and listen, lad, you'll hear the cold face working. There's many a marrer missing, lad, because he wouldn't listen, lad. Me father always used to say the pip works more than hewing. You got to coax the coal along and not be ripping and chewing. The deputy crawls from flat to flat. The putter rams the Germans, and the man at the face must know his place.
SNSOnlineshow.com, your brand new one-stop shop for all things SNS. Take a tour through our wide and diverse collection of shows and listen in to our exclusive range of in-depth interviews spanning the popular arts, featuring actors, writers, journalists, stand-up comedians, musicians, and more. You can also enjoy our shorter Bitesized series covering vibrant new theatre, television, and book releases. And with our arts lifestyle remit, you get to explore issue-based topics, including health, mental health, women's rights around the world, and LGBTQ. Contact us with both your comments and suggestions for future guests. And don't forget to read up on our blog, regularly updated with articles and photographs. A forum where everyone is welcome to contribute. SNSOnlineshow.com, your one-stop shop for all things SNS.